Hi everybody, Dr. Rick here of Raw Food Education. Today I'm going to make one of my favorite juices, which is one of the staples in my juicing / cleansing programs, and it's simply watermelon celery juice. I've got a nice organic sugar baby watermelon here, and I'm going to use the rind, and I'm also going to add celery to it. And the celery dilutes the carbohydrates a little bit, and it also really adds a really nice, rich, malty kind of flavor to the watermelon juice that's really, really good. And you know, the way I figured this out was years ago. Gosh, it's been over 20 years now since I worked at Hippocrates Health Institute. I was the guy that made the green juices. I'd spend all day making 2 batches of green juices where I'd run cucumber and celery and sunflower greens and buckwheat lettuce greens through a Norwalk press, and it pressed them all out, and it took a bunch of time. And they used to serve watermelon juice with the rind for breakfast. So I'd be getting a head start on my afternoon juices, and I'd do the cucumber and the celery first. And I noticed when I got some of the leftover watermelon juice that the guests got for breakfast and mixed that with some of the cucumber celery juice I had already made, it just really, really hit home, especially again with the celery in there. So in any case, I'm going to go through my basic procedure here and show you how to make this fantastic watermelon celery juice. So step 1 shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I'm going to take off the sticker and give the watermelon just a basic rinse off in the sink with the sponge here. Just sort of, even though it's organic, I wouldn't really want to juice a non-organic watermelon, although I have at times. Probably more of the pesticides get in there systemically. But in any case, this is an organic watermelon, and I'm just going to give it a basic rinse. And I'm going to let it dry over here for a moment. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and take the rubber band off of the celery, cut that, and of course just go ahead and give the celery a rinse as well. And hopefully I sound a little more clear now. I've actually got my wireless microphone on, so it should sound more direct and less echoey than the built-in microphone from the camera did before. So give those a basic rinse. Then I'm going to go ahead and dry off the watermelon. It'll be a lot easier to deal with and a lot easier to cut when it's good and dry. So I'm going to set that aside to use that again, of course, in just a moment. And I'm also going to dry off the celery a little bit here. Wanted to get the junk off with the water, but of course I don't want to consume a bunch of tap water in with my juice. That's not part of the plan. Now, because I'm using the Champion juicer here, and the Champion works great for watermelon juice. The watermelon part of it's great. A lot of you probably know from experience, though, if you put whole celery through the Champion, you're just going to get a bunch of the celery strings wound around the blade, and it's not going to work very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop the celery into fine, pretty, maybe 1/2 inch or so little pieces here. So when I put those in, the celery strings are going to be short enough so they won't wrap around the blade, and then I'll alternate that with some of the watermelon, which is a lot softer and more watery and less fibrous, and we won't get stuck and have to clean the blade and all that stuff while we're juicing, because that can be a real pain. So I'm just going to cut that up and then put all the celery pieces in a bowl right here by the juicer, all ready for action. And next, of course, I'm going to need to cut up the watermelon. And as a lot of you have probably done already and probably already figured out, it's not that easy to cut a watermelon because it's round and it's moving around all the time. So I've got a nice, good knife here, just something from Target. It has a good long blade on it. And I'm going to pick a spot that looks maybe as flat as possible to begin with. And I know I'm behind the camera here, but I'm just going to cut this piece off right here, and that way I can set the watermelon flat for future cutting. Now, of course, I want to juice this. I want to juice the rind and the red part here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this into pieces that are going to easily fit through the chute. There's no sense cutting it in 8 million pieces and having a bunch to go through, but I don't want it to be so thick that it's not going to fit. So there's the plunger, and there's what the size of it is. So I'm going to cut these into pieces that will go through pretty well. Cut that into 4 pieces. I'm going to set that aside over here in my bowl with the celery. And again, you're not going to see the first few of these. I'm going to cut this one off and do the same thing. And now what I can do, if I was left-handed this would be easier. Now what I can do is cut these into slices a little bit less, ideally just a little bit smaller than the width of the plunger. And you can see I have my old-fashioned wood plunger, which is kind of a rare thing these days, seeing they don't make those anymore. Well, we've gone to plan B. As it turned out, that first watermelon was actually bad. So sometimes that happens. We've actually had these around for a while. We bought these well over a month ago, and I bought 12 of them. And one watermelon makes a lot of juice, and I've been making other kinds of juices, so we knew they were getting older. So anyway, I got to the exact same point with this one that I was with the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and use my plunger as a guide. Or you could take this off and use the chute as a guide. You can see how big the pieces can be that'll still fit in there. And I'm going to go ahead and make a nice thick slice here. And a second and a third. I'm going to stack those on top of each other. And at this point I've gone through about half the watermelon. So I'm going to stack these on top of each other. And I'm going to flip them over. So now I've got the smallest piece on the top. And what I'm going to do is cut them again a little bit smaller than the chute. So they'll fit in, but they won't be too small. So I won't have 8 million pieces to put in there. So I'm just going to, and in the case of the Champion, that's maybe 1.5 inches or so. And I'm going to cut those up just like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the whole stack in half. Just like that, because as you see, as you'll see, when we start juicing this, if you tried putting the piece in with the rind down, it doesn't really go in so well. So you grab the pieces like this and you'll put it in like this, and it goes in easily with the soft part going down first. So in any case, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to make a nice thick slice. And this time I won't have to flip things over. I'm just going to put that right there. Next slice. I'm going to go right on top. And then I almost might get away with not cutting this, but probably not quite. So this is going to be a thinner slice. And again, I'm going to put that right on top there. Let me fix this one that fell. And I'm going to cut those up first to get this thing out of the way. This is just basically rind. I'm going to cut that in a few pieces and put that over there in my celery bowl. I'm going to go ahead and cut these pieces, again, to the right width. And you know, it reminds me, after I worked at Hippocrates Health Institute, I went to work for the Juice Man Company. And we traveled all over the country telling people about the benefits of fresh fruit and vegetable juices. And the speaker would always make some juice samples. So one of the tasks I would do is I would take the temporary workers, these people from the Kelly Temporary Work Agency. We just call them the Kellys. And so sometimes they'd say, hey, Rick, you know, you take the Kellys and have them cut up the watermelon and all that kind of thing, and, you know, show them how to do it. And what I would do is I would bring the chute with the top molded piece of the Juice Man juicer over to them, and I would explain. We don't want 800 little pieces, but we want them the right size so it fits in the chute. And I bring it there and explain it all and sit it on the table. And some of them really understood it really well. I mean, it's not too complicated, not rocket science, and cut the pieces just right. And others just didn't get it. You know, they'd make this giant piece, and I'd say, okay, now remember, here's the chute. Here's how big the piece is. You see, that piece is too big to fit in. Oh, or, you know, they'd make them super small. So anyway, depending on the kind of juicer you are using, you want to cut these to the right size. So now we're ready to go. We've got our watermelon pieces here, and we've got the pieces of the rind and the celery over in the bowl. And I'm going to go ahead and start juicing here. And then over here, I've got my strainer and a large, whatever this you might cook in here, corn or a lobster, but we've never used this for such things. This basically catches the large quantities of juice because we're going to fill this up several times. So we're going to have these standing by over here, and we are ready to start actually juicing. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and turn the juicer on. I'm going to start out with some of these rind pieces over here. Get us started. Get a few of those through. And you can see so far this stuff's pretty green looking, and that's because the rind is green. Now though, we're starting to get bunched up with junk in there, so now we're going to have to put some of the softer parts in and flush some of the fiber through. So we'll just sort of alternate rind pieces and celery pieces with the softer pieces, and you can see they're just about the right size, gets plenty in there. And we'll grab the bottom pieces here. Again, I'm putting them soft end down, running the seeds through there too. That's no problem. You can see the pulp coming out here into the sink. And now that I've flushed things through pretty well, I'm going to go ahead and add some celery pieces. So I'll do maybe a couple of handfuls of those. And before it starts to get too fibrous and clog things up, I'm going to go ahead and add some more watery pieces. And then again, keep alternating rind and celery with the watery pieces in between, and you sort of go in a proportional manner, and you just do that throughout the entire process. And then it didn't take long before our container is full here. So I've actually brought this thing over here because sometimes it spills a little bit, and I'm just going to run that through the strainer, and there it goes, spilling a little bit. So I'm glad I've got it over the sink. You know, this spout is really lame. Sometimes it actually works a lot better just to pour it from the side. So there we go, and I'm going to let that drain and go ahead and keep juicing. So I've continued alternating my more fibrous pieces with my more watery pieces. Now I've got my second container full, and I'm going to go ahead and just put that. I'm spilling a little, but that's okay. I got a good strainer that's nice and deep, so it's got a good capacity in there. And now at some point, probably next time, I'm going to need to stir this a bit with a spoon and sort of shake the strainer to get all the liquid through the fiber, which is now still in the way. But for now, I can let that go a little bit and add the last little bit and keep on juicing. So I've continued to add my ingredients in a roughly proportional manner, although I don't have much celery left and still have some watermelon left. Now I've got my third container filled, and what I'm going to need to do is use a spoon here to work some of this through, because I still have, you can see, some liquid in here. So I'm going to work some of that through, because there's no sense wasting the juice. The whole point of doing this is to get the juice out. So I'm just going to kind of run the spoon around. And what also works a little bit is if you just sort of shake it, maybe in circles, you'll get more of the surface area of the screen where more can go through. And at some point, you've got to trade off between time and yield. So you don't want to spend 10 more minutes shaking to get 8 more drops out. So I'll just go ahead and get that so it's pretty dry at that point. There's not much more juice coming out, although you can still see a little bit. But it's pretty dry at that point. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of tap it down here with the other pulp. And you know what? I'll give it a quick rinse, just to get all the stuff out of there so the rest can go through more easily. And because I'm not a big fan of tap water in my juice, I'll probably get a couple drops or so, but I'm just going to give that a quick dry with the dish towel. And then I can go ahead and pour the third container's worth of watermelon juice in here and getting those drips again. Boy, usually I'm a little better at it, but there we have it. Real life juicing here. And then I'll go ahead and finish the rest. And finally, we filled this last one up about halfway. So we got 3.5 quarts worth of juice out of that small head of celery and the 1 sugar baby watermelon. Oh, add a little bit. Give it a little, I spilled a little bit there. I'll go ahead and pour the rest in. And while that's going through, I can clean up the dishes and the juicer parts and then come back to this at the end. In fact, this pulp is going to go in our yard waste container because in our county, Sonoma County, California, you can put kitchen scraps and compost like this in the yard waste container with your branches and leaves and other stuff, and then they turn it into compost, and then you can buy it again from them, but that's great because they compost everything. It takes a few years. In fact, some of you have seen our other episodes. We've got a bunch of that compost in our backyard in our raised beds that we're growing vegetables in. One thing about cleaning your juicer, you want to make sure that you clean this screen part really thoroughly and give it a little bit of an inspection. You want to make sure that the holes aren't starting to get clogged up. And I might have 1 or 2 clogged there, but that's not too bad. But once the holes get really clogged up, then it's more like having the blank in place and a lot of the material starts going through and going out with the pulp instead of coming down out through the juice spout. So in any case, scrubber sponge usually works pretty well. And when that doesn't work, you get a really good thick bristled scrub brush. And you can scrub a lot of the stuff out there. And then if worse comes to worse and you're really clogged up, you can actually put the screen, or the same thing works for a strainer, in some boiling water and just really loosen all that stuff up. And now that all the dishes are cleaned up, if we take a look in the strainer here, most of the liquid's gone through. So we'll give it a few extra shakes here. That should be good. Got just about everything now. We're going to set that aside. And now we have got a large container, 3.5 quarts worth of watermelon juice. I've got 4 ball jars out here with sealing tops, and I'm going to seal up 3 of them and then drink the leftover stuff right now. So because there's a mix of things and stuff tends to separate, I'm just going to, in this case, take the knife and stir it around, get everything nice and even. Because you know, it's interesting, when you save this stuff for the next day, you'll see that the green's all on top and the red solid stuff is down on the bottom. And that's okay, you just shake it up and it's fine. And by the way, that same principle that heavier solid things tend to go to the bottom is one way that clinicians can tell if you are anemic or not, and if all of your cells in your body are getting enough oxygen. But that's another story having to do with lab work, but sometimes those principles are pretty cool, and they can come in handy in many ways. So we're going to go ahead and fill that first one up, right up to the top, quart number 1. quart number 2. Again, we got the lids all ready to put those in the fridge and keep them nice and fresh. And then there is number 3. And it looks like we had made about 3.5 quarts. Some of them might have been a little over full. Ooh, and look at that. I'm getting an entire 4th quart, and to get all this out, I'm going to have to really fill these up. That's okay with me, because this stuff is fantastic. Even have a little tiny bit left over. So let's see, I'll pick the one that's the least full, and go ahead, and now's for the moment of truth. We'll see how it came out. That is so good. You get the sweetness from the watermelon, but because of the rind and because of the celery, it's not overwhelmingly or disgustingly sweet, but there's plenty of carbohydrates in here to fuel your activities while you're juicing, so you don't have to just lay around like you're water fasting, and you can actually get a lot of things done. A lot of good nutrients in here. And most importantly, probably, is that it takes a minimum of effort on your body's part to digest and assimilate this stuff, so you have lots of energy left over for cleansing, healing, and repairing. You don't always feel great during some of those times, but at other times you feel amazingly clear and good, and you know you're doing something great for your body and something really good for yourself. And this stuff's delicious, and the celery in there gives it that nice malty groundedness. So hope this has been useful. Hope you all enjoy your watermelon celery juice out there, and good luck.